What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, I'm just out in the garden today. I'm going to be kind of fixing up our tomatoes. They've grown quite a bit, and so I need to get them staked to our posts here. But I wanted to come out here to really talk about some reasons why your garden could be growing slowly. Now, this is brought to our attention by quite a few different gardeners throughout the past couple of days, and it's becoming a little more prevalent of a question, so I wanted to tackle it. Now, your garden might be growing really fast where you're at, but where we're at, our garden is actually growing quite slowly. Now, by this time last year, we would have already had ripe tomatoes. Generally, we start to get our first ripe tomatoes right around the 4th of July. This year, that's not even remotely possible. We barely even have tomatoes forming, and we're almost into July as it is. So we are well behind our schedule for our kind of where our garden should be at. But I'm not concerned either. Like, I know that we are definitely gonna have ripe tomatoes by the end of the season. Like, there's no question about it. It's just, you have expectations and then you have reality. And when the two don't align, that's where you start to have some questions. And so in today's episode, I'm hopefully gonna just, not only put your mind at ease, but also kind of educate you on reasons why your garden could be just maturing at a slower rate. So the first reason to consider is temperature. Now, this is obviously a real important thing when it comes to plant growth, especially your warm weather crops like your tomatoes and peppers, cucumbers and stuff like that. They don't like cold temperatures, and cold temperatures will typically slow down plant growth. And so that's why in the early season, your garden will grow a lot slower, and then once you start to get those warm nights, that's where everything just seems to explode with growth. And so depending on your season, you could be having an abnormally cold season. In our case, we've had quite a few warm days, but I know that at least our spring started off really slow. And that's because our spring was very cold. We had a very late frost. We generally don't have a frost past Mother's Day, but we actually had 3 frosts past Mother's Day. So it really resulted in a very slow start for us. We didn't end up getting our garden planted until about 2 weeks after Mother's Day, which is incredibly rare for us. So temperature plays a huge role. Now, if you are experiencing temperatures that are at or around 60 degrees or so, generally that's kind of the threshold for what will stimulate plant growth or reduce plant growth. Is 60 degrees. That's kind of the threshold that we look at. So the nighttime temperatures are obviously going to be lower than the daytime temperatures, but you look at what's called just an average temperature. You take the high and you take the low, and you basically divide it by 2, right? So if it's 70 degrees and 50 degrees, you have an average daily temperature of about 60 degrees, right? So basic math. Don't make me do more than that, I'll fail. I'm a gardener, not a math teacher. So that's generally that threshold you look for is around 60 degrees average to either promote or stimulate plant growth or reduce it. All right, the second reason why your garden could be growing slowly is a lack of rainfall. Now, I know it goes without saying that obviously plants do need water, but plants actually really love rainwater. And the reason why is because rainwater has 2 things that plants absolutely love. They love oxygen. When rain is falling from the sky, it actually oxygenates. It's way different than tap water, which does have dissolved oxygen, but not nearly as much as rainfall does. That oxygen actually stimulates the aerobic bacteria in your soil, the beneficial bacteria that we're trying to foster in a healthy soil ecology. But it also helps to stimulate root growth as well, because roots are part of plants, and plants need oxygen like you and I do, right? The roots love that aeration in the soil. And so it provides air or oxygen, but it also provides nutrients. There's lots of subtle dissolved nutrients, very small trace amounts of nutrients in rainwater that will help to fertilize your plants as well. And that's a big reason why your plants grow so much after that first rain. And that's because of all that there's lots of nitrogen, because there's nitrogen in the air, right? But there's also lots of other little trace minerals found in rainwater that you're not going to find in your city water, which has often been taken out or filtered out, and it's very kind of sterile. But then there's also other chemicals added to city water that end up killing plant life, like chlorine and chloramine, which are meant to sterilize the water. It's meant to make it potable or drinkable, but it often kills the soil bacteria found in your soil when you water very heavily with city water. So that's why rainwater is so much different than just regular water. But the second reason why rainwater is so important is because plants will conserve water during a period of drought. And the reason why they stop growing when they're dry is because of how they respire. And that respiration is how they breathe. Now they breathe much like you and I do, only the reverse, right? So we breathe out carbon dioxide and we breathe in oxygen. But plants do the exact opposite. Plants, they will bring in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. They use the carbon dioxide to actually generate energy through photosynthesis, and it actually helps the plant to grow. But one of the downsides to a plant respiring, it happens at night generally when the sun is not out, because it's a built-in protective measure so it doesn't overly dehydrate. But what happens at night is those stomata will open. And when it opens, it'll breathe out the oxygen, but it'll also breathe out water as well. And the water is what keeps the plant nice and healthy, but also helps it to continue to grow. And so much like the stomata does not open during the day to risk dehydrating, during periods of drought, the stomata will open very little, if not at all, because it doesn't want to dehydrate. It's a protective measure. And that's why your plants will grow slowly during a drought, is because of the fact it's conserving water. Plants are incredibly smart, and they've grown to be incredibly smart over the years in order to survive. And so during periods of drought, you will find your plants are going to grow slower, and that's exactly why. All right, the third reason why your garden could be growing slowly this year is a lack of air quality. Now, air quality can take on many different forms. You could have dust pollution, you could have smoke pollution, you could even have smog pollution. And that pollution is basically particulate in the air. And essentially what you can look at particulate in the air as is essentially a filter or a screen. And you've probably heard of using things like shade cloth in the garden. Shade cloth is essentially a mesh net that you put over your garden, and it blocks sunlight. Well, it doesn't block all the sunlight, it just blocks a certain percentage of sunlight. And what happens is when you have air pollution, it could be, let's say, dust. Well, the dust essentially is acting as that screen, that the sun is coming down through the clouds, but it's hitting that dust, and it's basically helping to filter out some of that sunlight from hitting your plants. And so having poor air quality absolutely can affect slow plant growth, or affect plant growth slowly, right? And so we have our plants here, and I think that is a huge reason. I mean, yes, we did get a late start, but we had the smokiest air we've ever had because of all the wildfires that have been going on in the area. And that smoke 100% does affect plant growth. In fact, I've talked to many farmers. There's also many farmers that document their stuff even on YouTube. And so you can go check out the Veggie Boys is a great channel. They're great guys. And they were saying how they rely on farming, obviously, for a living. And they were saying how the smoke has really slowed down their growth this year. But now that the sun's come out, things are starting to grow again. But that is 100% a reason why your garden could be slower this year than other years, is just those air quality concerns. And so, obviously this is something that should eventually kind of fix itself. It shouldn't last forever. But in the early season, when growth is really important, that can be the deciding factor between being a week behind schedule or a couple months behind schedule. All right, the fourth reason why your garden could be growing slowly is a lack of nutrients. Now, there's one nutrient in particular that is responsible for plant growth and leaf development, and that's nitrogen. So in the case of this tomato here, if we noticed that the plant was starting to slow down, it was really kind of just stunted, and the leaves were starting to turn yellow or yellow-green, kind of like a lime green color, we could come in with some nitrogen. It could be things like blood meal, it could be fish fertilizer, it could even be compost. Really, there's no certain type of nitrogen or a certain source of nitrogen that plants are going to appreciate more than the other. They're just going to appreciate some nitrogen. And so making sure that you add some nitrogen into your garden will definitely help to ensure that the plant keeps growing. Now, I also want to make a really important distinction here that the plant being stunted and you being impatient are very, very different. I know a lot of gardeners that end up really trying to almost force their plants to grow faster because they think their plants are growing slow. That is really where you have to understand maturity dates. It does take a couple years to kind of understand how fast a plant should be growing. Because a lot of times when you're a first-time gardener, you look at your garden and you say, man, this is not growing fast enough. And you have to assess, you have to take a step back and assess, is the plant growing fast enough? Is it growing just fine? Or am I just being impatient? Because oftentimes you can then try to come in and almost intervene, and you can almost do more harm than good by doing that. Because what if the plant doesn't need nutrients? Well, then you're over fertilizing. Then you're either wasting money, or you could even harm the plant by giving it nutrients that it doesn't need. And so it's really, really important to kind of understand that as well. But assuming you do know that your plant is stunted and slow, or your plant is turning shades of yellow, then you absolutely can come in with some nitrogen, and that'll certainly help to fix that. All right, the fifth and final reason why your garden could be growing slowly, it just has to do with the varieties that you chose. Now, this again is something that you can control. It's something that you can pick in the very beginning of the season. You can pick a variety that has a longer maturity date or a shorter maturity date. A prime example is in the case of our tomatoes here. Our tomatoes range in maturity days. Some will mature in about 60 days, others will mature in about 85 days. That makes a huge difference with how the plant grows, because biologically the plant is going to be growing in accordance to its maturity date. And its maturity date, when it's more days to mature, it's going to take a lot longer to grow. And that's why the maturity date is what it is. If it was a fast growing tomato, it wouldn't have 85 days to mature, it'd be more like 65. And so knowing the maturity date, going into it, knowing what you're planting will help so much with your expectations. And I know that the plants that are 85 days are gonna grow slower and produce fruit slower than ones that are at 65 days. Some of your heftier beefsteaks will grow slower than your cherry tomatoes, which are smaller and they take way less energy to produce that fruit. It's all about energy conservation, like I said. If it had all the energy in the world, I'm sure that 85-day tomato would look more like 55 days because, well, there's endless amounts of energy, right? But because it has to produce a 1-pound tomato, that takes a ton of energy to produce that, and it oftentimes won't do that until the plant is ready for it. There's not enough plant growth to sustain that big of a fruit. And so just knowing your maturity dates going into it can help a ton. And those are really the 5 reasons why your garden could be growing slowly this year. And obviously there are a whole host of other things, tiny little things that I don't really want to get into because they're not all that important. These are the big 5. And so I wanted to stick to these 5, and maybe we'll touch on some other reasons later. Let me know in the comments box down below if you have any questions or if this made sense to you. And also let me know something you learned in the comments box down below, or something that maybe helped you have a little aha moment. I love to know. I think that's a super cool thing about what I do, is I love to see the light bulb come on in people's heads. Yes, these videos are entertaining. Yes, they're meant to maybe make you giggle or look at things in a different way, but it's the aha moment that I love, and it's that light bulb that I aim to have pop on in your head. So let me know a little light bulb moment that you had, and if you did enjoy, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you all on the next episode. All right, take care everyone. Grow bigger. Bye.